Hello, and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick. Probably a great many of you have already seen some clips and commentary of the former speechwriter for Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, one Sarah Hurwitz, and the things that she said to the leadership conference at the Jewish Federations of North America. I wanted to chip in my own views on this because I just felt like it's important to really take it to a Jewish communal commentary along with a political one, um, and a social one. There's so much here to unpack. I just couldn't resist, and as much as I've admired a good deal of what I've seen said about it. I just felt like there was something more for me to say. So what I thought I would do is take each of the clips and um, basically, kind of go piece by piece, sort of an annotated review of some of the things that she has been saying. A couple of different appearances here from what I can gather. So let's start with the first one. And here we go.
Mean, this is the basic breakdown of liberalism, right? And this is like, there are no more sides. When you're like, well, this side is this, there's no sides. Okay. There's basically kind of people across the spectrum now are doing kind of the same. I mean, this is the basic break.
So I think you probably couldn't see that. So let me go back uh, and
I mean, this is the basic breakdown of liberalism, right? And this is like, there are no more sides. When you're like, well, this side is this, there's no sides. Okay. There's basically kind of people across the spectrum now are doing kind of the same thing. Like Mamdani's idea of like, look, you're taking away money from really good, struggling folks here at home to give it to fund American, Israeli apartheid. Kind of same vibe as America First, right?
okay. So let's start with that for a second here. I mean, since this is sort of a classic thing and something we've seen many, this is the part of what she's saying that's very much her uh, her persona as a mainstream centrist Democrat. This notion that there's this extreme left that is represented by those horrible democratic socialists like Zoran Mamdani, that sort of does this horseshoe thing and meets the far right on the other end. So Mamdani is basically saying that why are when Mamdani is saying why are we giving money to Israel when we have needs here at home? It's the same thing as America First. When the Nick Fuentes is of the world, and similarly also, let's not forget Marjorie Taylor Greene as well, um, and others, you know, complain about, just don't give anybody anything. And the two things couldn't be more different. Okay. The the absurdity of this argument is plain if you just think about some basic facts. Israel is one of the richest per capita countries in the world. I just published an article that talks about it being the 31st country in the world in terms of gross domestic product per capita. And that puts it ahead of countries like this. New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, countries we would never think to give aid to because we would say they don't need it; they can support themselves. Uh, when we talk about Nick Fuentes, these are people who are selfish and do not want to help others, do not believe in foreign aid because they believe that people in other countries should pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. They say the same thing about people here. That is absolutely not the argument that Mamdani is making. Mamdani is making a principled argument that we should not be supporting genocide, that we should not be supporting ethnic cleansing, that we should not be supporting apartheid. Okay, Israel does not need this money. We have needs for it here. Okay, and she is simply uh uh eliding that and bringing these two things together that have no place with each other. So let's go on.
You're taking good money at home, you're using it to give it to these powerful Jews. So like to see both parts of the world kind of focusing in on that. And I know Spamberger one, I know Marky Sherrill one. That's very heartening to me. Those are my Democrats. But I also worry that in some number of years, when millions of college educated Americans are out of work because of AI, they're going to feel as aggrieved as a lot of working class folks who are out of work because of globalization. And like these are people who, they spent tens of thousands of dollars to get an education. They did everything right. They're going to be unemployed. And I kind of think that Mamdani message of like, it's because of the Jews and here's some free stuff and bad policy ideas. Like, I think that's going to be pretty appealing to a lot of college educated folks. And I think Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes are going to be really appealing, especially to younger people. So, like,
Where do you even start with that kind of bullshit? Um, First of all, when has Mamdani ever blamed Jews for anything? Show me one instance where he's even hinted at it. Um, that is an absurd and offensive thing to say based on nothing but her own racism. It's anti-Semitic on every level. It is certainly Islamophobic. Um, it is an absolutely contemptible thing to say. It traffics in exactly what Professor Sahar Aziz and I wrote a paper about. Um, the notion presumptive that Muslims are, as we named the paper, presumptively anti-Semitic. That if you're Muslim, especially if you're a Muslim who thinks that gasp Palestinians should have the same rights as everybody else, you are by definition anti-Semitic. That is really what she's saying here. Okay, that's what's coming out here. And I want us to keep in mind that this is not somebody who is, from the wacky right. This is not a Itamar Ben Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich. I am sure, without knowing for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that if you asked her if she would vote for Netanyahu if she was in Israel, I don't know if she has Israeli citizenship, if she's a dual citizen or not, but I'm sure if you asked, I would bet that if you asked her if she would vote for Netanyahu, she'd say absolutely not. I would never vote for Netanyahu. Um, so this is just ridiculous on its face. Also, this notion that there is this, you know, that views on Israel are informed by people's own personal grievances is a terrible distortion of what has happened in terms of populism on the right and trying to translate that into populism on the left. Now, there is certainly anti-Semitism, and one of the forms historically anti-Semitism has taken is populist conspiracy theories about the Jews as puppet masters and controlling all sorts of things. And you could find that. I found it on the left. I found it among some anti-Zionists who unfortunately get inspired by groups like APAC and ADL that do have rather ugly influence here in Washington. Um, and they put those two things together and come up with an anti-Semitic Jewish conspiracy theory, which is nonsense. I do see it in the anti-Zionist movement that tends to look to Zionism as being the root of all evil in the world, which is also absurd. That being said, none of that has any bearing on the fact that Israel is a state that is a settler colonial state, that is an apartheid state, and that has committed genocide, and that has been committing crimes against Palestinians since before it was a state. Okay, and trying to bring these things into some sort of coexistence, that the view that Palestinians should have freedom and equal rights, and that killing them wholesale is not legitimate, is somehow the same as the ideology of a Nick Fuentes and a Tucker Carlson with their great replacement theories and their race war ideologies. That is just it's absurd and offensive. So let's give her a chance to talk a little more.
Maybe this won't happen. Maybe the sane normies will win out. I don't know, but that's not, social media is a global medium. You used to get your news, if you were in America, from American news sources. Like you had to go to a really weird bookstore to find Al Jazeera, but now your phone will just send that to your kid's brain. And
So, I began my serious work as an activist, what I consider, my actual career as an activist, as a media analyst. And this was back in the late 1990s. And this was when a lot of the liberal media stuff was just starting to bubble over. Fox News was just coming onto the scene. and capitalizing on that. The thing is that they were hitting a sore spot. They were hitting a sore spot because the mainstream American media was giving people an absurdly slanted view of the world. The world within the United States was being portrayed in a questionable manner, let alone outside the United States. It was insane. That is why so many people became disillusioned with the mainstream media. And yes, that really started happening in the biggest way on the right. That was where it really grabbed hold of a more of a larger audience, one might say. It was also always happening on the progressive left. I mean, you can go back to Ed Herman and Noam Chomsky's book Manufacturing Consent, which is a classic of the field. Um, you can look at many, many books. David Barsamian's work. This is old stuff that was looking at the American media landscape that was really bad. That was really distorting and telling people that the world was something other than what it was, and it led to uh, many horrific misconceptions that spread throughout this country. How did the Red Scare, happen in the first place? Because we had this myopic view of the world that was fed to us by media. Many of those media were very sorry for what they had helped to create inadvertently, but it did happen. We can look at many, many examples. The idea, by the way, that you could ever go to a bookstore and find Al Jazeera is absurd because Al Jazeera is a broadcast network. But um, you didn't have to go to a weird bookstore. You had to look. I can speak from my own experience that the ridiculous narrative that I was fed growing up in an Orthodox Jewish home about Israel in the 1970s um, struck me as odd because Israel never did anything wrong, and everybody does something wrong. Israel never was ever, it was, and no one ever had a rational reason to be angry at Israel. Only anti-Semitism could explain it. And I was I was not very old. I was maybe 13 or 14 when I started reading Zionist histories of Israel that completely exploded that myth. But they were Israeli histories, not American. Um, I don't know how this woman was raised, but it was clearly under some serious delusions. Um, and hence her concern about the world around her and her fear of people seeing what's actually happening on the ground.
That's where our young people are getting their news. And so I don't know, I don't see a lot of sane normie input coming at especially younger people. So I don't see how we get ourselves out of this.
Sane normie input. That would be the input that comes from Israel, right? Or pro-Israel, uh, if you want to say propagandists or just Israel supporters, whatever you want, however you want to define it. That's the sane normie stuff. What's scary to her, and look at the expression on her face and see how scared she is. um, what's scary to her is that people might actually be seeing things that are happening on the ground to Palestinians. This is really the root of what she objects to. She does not want her children, if she has any, I don't know her personal story, but she does not want Jewish children, certainly, and American children in general, to see what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza, to see what's happening in Palestinians in the West Bank. Uh, as you might imagine, those of you who follow me on social media, I get lots of stuff from people on social media. Telling me, well, go to Gaza, go to the West Bank, see how you're treated. I've been to Gaza, I've been to the West Bank. It's treated fine. I went to Gaza wearing a yarmulke once. Didn't have a problem. Nobody cared. They didn't care that I was Jewish. They cared what I thought about their uh, situation, what I thought about the situation. And even that, you know, um, they cared about the people I met cared about who I was, who was I, what did I think, what did and I was very welcomed. And by the way, I when I went to Gaza, I went to Palestinian parts, was welcomed there, and I went to settlements. This is back in the day before the withdrawal of the settlements. I went to settlements. I was welcomed there too, and I talked to people. I was open about who I was, what I thought. They disagreed. Some of them even got mad at me, but nobody shot me. And certainly nobody looked at me askance because I was Jewish. That just didn't happen. This is a fantasy. There are many such things, many such fantasies. So now I'm going to move to the main clip of the of Hurwitz's talks at the Federation. So, here is where we're really going to get into the meat of it and the things that you've seen her say. So, um,
And, I think, unfortunately, the very smart, I think, bet that we made on Holocaust education to serve as anti-Semitism education in this new media environment, I think that is beginning to break down a little bit because, Holocaust education is absolutely essential. But I think it may be confusing some of our young people about anti-Semitism because they learn about big, strong Nazis hurting weak, emaciated Jews. And they think, oh, anti-Semitism is like anti-Black racism, right? Powerful white people against powerless Black people. So when on TikTok all day long they see powerful Israelis hurting weak, skinny Palestinians, it's not surprising that they think, oh, I know, the lesson of the Holocaust is you fight Israel. You fight the big, powerful people hurting the weak people.
the lesson of the Holocaust actually is you fight the big, powerful people hurting the weak people. That is actually the lesson. That's what never again is supposed to mean. That's what we were supposed to learn from the Holocaust, not that it only applies to Jews. But more than that, I mean, you see the simplistic approach to even the question of racism and the question of Jewish oppression of Palestinians and Nazi oppression of Jews. All of these questions to her is such a simple. It's a black and white, and it's a good guy, bad guy. And there are good guys, obviously good guys and bad guys. Not, I think generally most of us agree that Nazis are bad guys, and that in the Holocaust, the Jews were the victims, um, among other people. There were many other people who were victimized by the Nazis, but Jews were at the top of the list. The lesson absolutely was that we don't do it, but that's not an acceptable lesson to her. It's not acceptable to her that the Holocaust teaches us that these things should not happen to Jews. It's not acceptable to her, in particular, that the Holocaust should be teaching Israel restraint. The Holocaust teaches people like Sarah Hurwitz one thing and one thing only: fear, and everybody's out to get us, and so we have to get them first. That is what she wants Holocaust education to teach. She is afraid that when young people who actually think that all people deserve the right to live without being blown up, shot, starved, and raped, um, that applies to everybody, and that Jews, like anybody else, should not be permitted to do those things. This is what she does not like. So we'll move on now to the main portion.
I think that since October 7th,
She is just I don't know how else to put it. She is everything that humanity needs to fight against. Not because she is the embodiment of evil or something horrible like that. She's not. She is what Hannah Arendt referred to as the banality of evil. And I think you're going to see that in this next clip.
really before then, there have been huge shifts in America on how people think about Jews and Israel. And I think that is especially true of young people. So we are now wrestling with a new, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, it used to be that the media you got in America was American media, and it was pretty mainstream. It generally didn't express extreme anti-Israel views. You had to go to a pretty weird bookstore to find global media and fringe media. But today,
So I intentionally had that second clip here so that you could see that these are rehearsed lines. These aren't things that are that are just flowing out of her mouth. She didn't, she didn't just sort of have this attack of verbal diarrhea where these horrible things are just coming out. Um, and she might have thought later, like, I didn't express myself properly, or God, it may, I shouldn't have said that. I didn't think that through. None of that. These are things she thought about and she scripted. This is the message she wanted to send. She wasn't mincing words. She wasn't stumbling over what her real meaning. She was being explicit. As you see, she says almost the same thing in this clip as in the earlier clip about media. And again, she talks about, extreme anti-Israel. I mean, she's talking about video clips of people who filmed their own experiences, and some of those people were, yes, Palestinians in Gaza. Some of those people who filmed their own experience were Israeli soldiers who posted them very proudly on Telegram or TikTok or various other social media sites, and laughed and had a great time and said, look at how we're doing this. Look at what we're doing to the Palestinians. Look at how much fun we're having, hurting and killing these people, destroying their homes and looting them, and just in every way desecrating the name of the Jewish people as if they're defending the Jewish people. That is what she's talking about when she's talking about extremism. I mean, this is extreme anti-Israel. Well, a lot of this is coming from Israeli soldiers. This extreme anti-Israel ideology that she's talking about is simply sharing the truth, sharing the facts. And I can tell you, on a very personal level, I wish these things were not the truth. I wish these things were not the facts. I don't want this to be true. I don't want, yes, I do feel connected to other Jews, no matter who they are. And I don't want them to be doing these things, but they are. And people need to see that. People need to understand it.
We have social media, which is a global medium. Right? It is shaped, its algorithms are shaped by billions of people worldwide who don't really love Jews. And
what a bunch of crap. The algorithms are not shaped by billions of people worldwide who don't really love Jews. The algorithms on social media, first of all, are controlled in many instances by these social media corporations. And in fact, we have seen numerous examples of how some of these social media sites have intentionally repressed the voices of Palestinians so that people don't get them. But to the extent that these are shaped by billions of people around the world, to the extent that the algorithm functions on what people are searching for and are playing, and that then makes them pop up in more feeds, to that extent, it's simply because these are the things that people want to see. They want to see what's going on. They want to hear the voices of the people in Gaza, and many of them want to hear the voices of the Israeli soldiers that are posting a lot of these videos. She doesn't want to deal with that aspect. You know that she will never go anywhere near it because that really screws up her whole narrative.
So while in the 1990s, a young person probably wasn't going to find Al Jazeera or someone like Nick Fuentes, today those media outlets find them. They find them on their phones. It's also this increasingly post-literate media, less and less text, more and more videos. So you have TikTok just smashing our young people's brains all day long with video of carnage in Gaza. And this is why so many of us can't have a sane conversation with younger Jews, because anything that we try to say to them, they are hearing it through this wall of carnage. So I want to give data and information and facts and arguments, and they are just seeing in their minds carnage, and I sound obscene.
Yes, Sarah, you sound obscene. And the reason you sound obscene is because they're seeing what's happening, and your data and your information and your made up things and your made up arguments and your falsification of the truth isn't getting through. And I understand that's frustrating, but that's the world. And I think I think it is this sentence that or this last statement of hers that I find so profoundly disturbing and offensive, because she's not just talking about keeping secrets. She's talking about the absolute denial of what is actually going on the ground. She's saying, I'm trying to make arguments, I'm trying to bring data and information and propaganda, and these people are seeing what's happening, and I can't get through. Is that supposed to be a complaint? We're supposed to worry that she can't get through reality with her bullshit? And I think the real obscenity is that she is trying to find a way to get this younger generation to love Israel and to think Israel is wonderful. And it doesn't occur to her for a second, not for 1 second, that maybe the best way to do that is to have Israel stop murdering civilians, stop murdering women, stop murdering children, stop starving entire populations and depriving them of water and medicine and shelter, because that is still going on despite the ceasefire. We have now Gaza's getting colder. It is getting wetter. People are getting sick. There is still no medicine. There is still insufficient food and water. There is no shelter. Israel has destroyed almost all the shelter in Gaza. They're still bombing tents. They're still shooting at civilians. Let us recall the IDF's own database showed, as 972 and The Guardian revealed, that according to their definitions and their numbers, 83% of the people of the casualties in Gaza were civilians. That's Israel's military figures. Okay, and they have a very broad definition of who a combatant and who a terrorist is. So the actual number, by more sane definitions, is higher, 83%. And when smug, ignorant, and arrogant people say, well, that's just war, it's not. It's not. Go take a look at those figures in Ukraine. It's not close. It's not even a quarter of that. That civilian casualties would be that high. Mostly military. That's what happens in war. What happens in genocide is what you see in Gaza and what you see in Sudan and places like that right now. Right now, that we can be doing something about. But she doesn't want to have to deal with that. She only wants to be able to have people love Israel and ignore all of this. And it just doesn't occur to her that as a person of at least some influence in the American Jewish community and the Democratic Party, she might be able to say, shouldn't we maybe get Israel to stop doing some of this stuff? It doesn't even occur to her. It's just not even a consideration. I mean, this is how little value a person like her places on the lives of Palestinians. You'll note she cares nothing. She talks about this carnage in Gaza as an obstacle, not as something to avoid, to be done away with. Well, let's hear a little more from her.
And, I think, unfortunately, the very smart, I think, bet that we made on Holocaust education to serve as anti-Semitism education in this new media environment, I think that is beginning to break down a little bit because, Holocaust education is absolutely essential. But I think it may be confusing some of our young people about anti-Semitism because they learn about big, strong Nazis hurting weak, emaciated Jews. And they think, oh, anti-Semitism is like anti-Black racism, right? Powerful white people against powerless Black people. So when on TikTok all day long, they see powerful Israelis hurting weak, skinny Palestinians, it's not surprising that they think, oh, I know, the lesson of the Holocaust is you fight Israel. You fight the big, powerful people hurting the weak people.
Now, I wanted to let that play out again because I think after all we've heard here, it really brings something home. Holocaust education, she says, is essential. And I think she's right. The thing is, I think all genocide education is essential. We need to educate people about how many genocides there have been, and there have been way too many. There have been a lot of them. And they're often contentious. As we know, even to this day, more than a century later, the Armenian genocide is still politically contentious, right? Do we talk about the chattel slave trade as a genocide? It doesn't quite fit the modern definition, but as a story of murder and degradation of human life, it's as bad as any genocide we can name. You know, we hardly talk about the genocide that's happening in Sudan right now. We talked for a little while years back, some of you might remember, about another genocide in Darfur in Sudan when it was politically beneficial because the Janjaweed army that was carrying it out was an Arab army. And that was part of why A big part of why, in fact, one would say, I think very clearly, the key reason why it became such a cause célèbre in the United States was because that was an Arab army that was carrying out that genocide. People are not above, no people are above genocide. And and the Israeli people are continuing to commit one in Gaza by the legal definition of genocide. You know, the International Court of Justice has made it clear that there is a prima facie case for genocide. They are still deliberating on their decision. However, many genocide scholars have already decided. The consensus in the field is that this was a genocide, and these are, this is a field dominated by Jews and by, in many cases, Israelis, because Holocaust studies is a big part of that. That is the issue. The issue is that Israel is doing these things that Sarah Hurwitz does not want you to see. And she certainly doesn't want young people to see. And she does not see the solution as Israel not doing it. She does not see that as a solution. And I think we need to look at this very carefully because just, it plays out in other arenas. We can look, for example, at Israel's constant uh, violation of ceasefires in both Gaza and Lebanon. There are, at this moment, I'm speaking on November 24th, technically both ceasefires are still in place, and yet not a day goes by that Israel isn't violating them. And turning around and saying the other side's violating them, even by Israel's own accusations. By the way, even if we held every one of Israel's accusations of Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon violating the ceasefire, it isn't close to what Israel has done. Okay, many of these accusations are false, exaggerated, or minor. Some are real. It's a handful, a small handful, and all of them happened well after Israel uh, caused enormous damage during the ceasefire. And Israel stands and says, well, yes, there's a ceasefire, but this is a Hamas operative, so we can kill them. This is a Hezbollah operative, so we can bomb the suburb of Beirut that he's in. That's absurd. That's not ceasefire. Or more precisely, it's the Israeli version of ceasefire, which is the Arabs cease and we fire. These things, the fact that these things are tolerated, go hand in hand with the fact that there is genocide in Israel. And these are the things that young people are seeing go on that Sarah Hurwitz does not want them to see. And rather than try and get Israel to stop, because by the way, if you are somebody who really does care about Israel, if you are somebody who cares more specifically about Israelis and the life of Israelis, and that Israeli Jews should be able to live their lives in some degree of normalcy and security, then everything that Israel is doing and has done, really throughout its history, but certainly in the last 2 years, is what you should be protesting against. Because if Israelis want normalcy, if Israelis want not to have to live in fear, you can look and see a very clear path to how you get there. The problem for Palestinians is not that Israeli Jews are there. The problem is that Israeli Jews have dispossessed them and have oppressed them ever since they showed up. That's the problem. And if you address that problem, these other problems go away. Not in one day, not in one week. There will be still issues. It isn't such a simple thing to do, but that's not the direction that anyone has gone in. And the constant, instead, the supposed solution that the United States and Israel propose is to continue to ratchet up the oppression, ratchet up the violence, ratchet up the slaughter, and that just makes the whole thing harder and harder and to resolve. It in fact makes it impossible to resolve because the reasons are obvious. It erodes any goodwill between the parties. It erodes the very idea that the two sides, and particularly that Palestinians, can trust Israelis. So when we're talking about how do we get our children to have a different attitude, they do have a different attitude. They have a different attitude because they see what's going on. If you want to change that perception, change what's going on. Don't change whether or not they can see it. Okay. Stop Israel from doing what it's doing. Sarah Hurwitz, if you care about Israelis, and I know you do, maybe you don't care about anyone else, but you care about Israelis. If that's who you care about, get Israel to stop doing what it's doing. Get Israel to abide by ceasefires. Get Israel to agree to give to grant Palestinians and allow Palestinians the rights that every other human being in the world is entitled to, whether they have them or not. Allow Palestinians to live a life equal to those of Israeli Jews, and you'll be amazed at how much things change. They'll change quickly. They won't change entirely overnight, but I think you'd be surprised at how quickly they change. More than that, stop telling us that we have to blind our children. Stop telling Jews that we have to lie to our kids. Stop telling us that we have to tell younger Jews that what they see happening isn't what's really happening, because they know better, and they know what you're saying, and they know what Israel is doing. So if you found this of value, please like, share, subscribe. You can support this work. There should be some information on your screen right now about how to do that. And the more support I get, the more of these I can share with you. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.